I'm Steve Billett. I'm the director of the Legislative Affairs program at the Grad School of Political Management. I've been here for about a dozen years now, or maybe a little bit more, and proudly direct this program. I'm very pleased with what it's done for the school. More importantly, I'm proud of the kinds of people that we're producing that go to work here in the political system, in the political environments here in Washington, especially the people that go to Capitol Hill. We've got probably 100 people that are on and or around Capitol Hill. It's kind of hard to keep track of everybody at any given moment, but because they do move around quite a lot. But we have people in very senior positions. We have people who are serving as interns on Capitol Hill too. But everyone seems to want to move forward and get ahead. And one of the ways to get ahead is to get a degree from the school. And we've always believed that you could accelerate your career advancement on Capitol Hill with the exposure to the classes in this program. I mean, you can learn all this stuff on Capitol Hill by moving from one job to another over a period of time. And over a couple of years, you might pick up just about everything you can to be a chief of staff. Or you can go through this program and accelerate the process of it. We think that that's really a good way to go, an effective way to advance your career. Consistent with our ongoing program here at the GSPM, we bring in our graduates to talk to prospective students and other people interested in working on and around Capitol Hill from time to time. And in keeping with that, we brought together one of my favorite panels, some of my favorite people, I would say, who've gone through the program. In one case, in the case of Stephanie's program, she went through the political management program. But Ryan and Alex both went through the legislative affairs program. You know, Alex went on and went to law school then too, which didn't hurt him either, I'm sure. But all of these panelists have been active in Washington and successful in their careers. I'm going to let them talk to you about their experiences. But one of the things you have likely come to know and hear if you're contemplating a career in Washington and in the political arena, you probably need to spend some time on Capitol Hill. That the avenue to a bigger and better career runs through Capitol Hill. That doesn't mean to say that you have to go there and move on, because lots of people go there and stay, because for many people, it's a very satisfying kind of a career. But we'll get three different perspectives from the folks on the panel tonight, talking about their before, during, and after, or well, maybe not after yet with Ryan, yeah. But their perspectives on working on the Hill and their ideas about sort of what it takes to get there, what their particular background was. We'll start off with a couple of minutes with everyone introducing themselves. Talk a little bit about your background, where you're from, your unique background, Stephanie, and sort of what brought you to the Hill initially. So, and we'll start with Stephanie.
Okay. So my name is Stephanie Craig. I would love to tell you where I work, but I'm taking a week off between jobs, and I can't tell you where I'm going yet. So just take me for my word that I actually know what I'm doing. So I'm probably the only person that has the distinction, we don't know how to verify this, that's worked in the House and Senate in both Canada and the United States. And I came to the GSPN program after having spent a few years on the Canadian, on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, as well as the Canadian campaign trail. And while I've been in the US, which is longer than I'm willing to admit, it has been just a really fantastic experience. I never thought I would get a chance to do what I've gotten to do, both working on the Hill. I've worked in the House for House member on Ways and Means, and who got this special dispensation, which you don't normally get on Ways and Means, to work to get an extra committee, which is agriculture, because he was the lone member from the great state of North Dakota, and then also work on the Senate side for one of the senators from North Dakota, and then also go work on campaigns in Pennsylvania and Iowa and North Dakota and Missouri and Virginia and several other places. It has been something that I just could never even have imagined. I was born on the Arctic Circle. My dad is a Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer. I am the poster child for Canada. And I figure skate, and I know how to play hockey. But there was a moment when I was walking with my senator, and despite growing up literally in the woods, I could never find I found it perfectly from the House office buildings to the House press gallery. No problem. It used to be like a maze. But for some reason, I could never find my way when I worked on the Senate side from the Senate press gallery back to the Senate. I have no idea why. So if my boss was with me, he would have to basically walk me back to the office. And I'm walking down the hallway one day, and someone just goes, "Ooh, that's Senator Dorgan." And I looked at it, it's kind of hit me. I was like, this is really amazing. I am, from this little kid in the middle of nowhere in Canada, I've gotten to go work for one of the top U.S. senators. It has just been a career that I could never have even begun to anticipate. And with that intertwined a really fantastic life. And so much of that is attributable to GSPM, including one of my very best friends in the world, Mindy. So, yeah. Who, we can talk about her too. Another really fantastic graduate of GSPM. And, before I hand it over, it's a very interesting community. I think we've met once before, but we've never met. And within about 5 minutes, we'd all connected, about 25 people we know in common, and found a really common connection. That's really been one of the most beneficial things of going through the program, is just the people you meet, and you learn a lot from the practitioners that teach at the school, which I think is different than so many other places. But you also learn a whole lot from your classmates who then go on to become colleagues.
My name is Ryan Walker. I serve as Chief of Staff to Congressman Bob Latta from Ohio. And I'm still on the Hill. There's a before and a during, no after yet. And I'm from a small town called Defiance, Ohio, and very rural farm town. Whenever I tell people that, I've never seen the show, but they're like, "Oh, it's on Scandal or something like that." I don't know. Never seen the show, but everyone knows it. But I came here in 2002. I went to school, I did my undergrad at Kent State University in Ohio, and I had no intention of getting into politics, zero, initially. I graduated with a criminal justice degree. I come from a law enforcement family. I had every intention of being a DEA agent and knocking down doors and taking out bad guys. But that didn't work out. They went on this thing, a hiring freeze. The economy tanked a bit, and they went on a hiring freeze. And I'd always had an interest in politics, and I went and saw my local county party chairman. Said, "Hey, I just graduated college, and I'm interested in working in politics, and what can you tell me?" And he's like, "Give me your resume, and I'll send it to the congressman." So he did that, and I didn't hear anything. And this was, after 9/11, and didn't hear anything, and emailed the chief of staff, and finally one day I said, "I'm just going to go to Washington and kind of do the resume drop thing." And the first office I walked in was my congressman. I walked in and I said, "Can I ask for the chief of staff?" And he's like, "Oh, that's me." I said, "Yeah, I'm the guy that's been writing you and calling you religiously. Sorry about that. But I'm interested in working on the Hill." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've been on Army duty and I got called up." And so we went and had an hour and a half conversation. A week later, I got called to meet with the congressman, and they essentially created a position for me as this hybrid staff assistant and legislative correspondent. And 5 years later, when my then boss, he ended up passing away in office in September of 2007, and I thought I was done with the Hill. But the guy that got elected to succeed him asked me to stay on to be his chief of staff. And I've been with him now in January, it'll be 8 years. So I've collectively been on the Hill 13 years. I don't admit that too often. People are like, oh my God, you're old, you're a dinosaur, but really 13 years on the Hill is a long time. And I've worked for 2 members, 1 district. So, and both of my bosses have served, the one I'm working for now serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I think arguably the best committee in Congress, has the broadest jurisdiction, and we deal with everything from healthcare to tech and telecom policy to our nation's energy policy. So it's vibrant, it's fun. I also have gotten the opportunity to travel around the country and work on different campaigns, work on presidential campaigns, because every 4 years Ohio is a hotbed. I just wish once it wouldn't be. But it's provided a lot of opportunity being from the purple swing state of Ohio. But it's, when I first came here, I worked on Capitol Hill for the late Congressman Paul Gilmore. And in the first 3 years of doing so, I also went to school at night and, through GSPM. And those were from a time management perspective, the hardest 3 years at the beginning of my career, but the most worthwhile. And got to meet great people, Dr. Billett, and it's just, and I've enjoyed my experience so much that I've come back and it's been great, and serve as an adjunct professor for the Legislative Affairs program. I do that every summer. And it's just so rewarding, because what I received being a student was a unique perspective. And what I can give back then is an even more unique perspective, because I've been through the program and I currently work on Capitol Hill, and I've worked in the political arena. And to me, it's, there's so many people that think they know what goes on Capitol Hill, but really don't know. Because the first thing I tell my students every summer is, I'm sure you've all heard or seen about Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. Forget about it. And throughout the next 6 weeks, I try and tell them how the sausage is made. And it's not always pretty, and it shocks people to some extent. But it is what it is, and it's our government. It's the greatest country in the world, and no offense to Canada.
Oh, none taken.
And we're able to, in this program, give students a perspective that they'll get nowhere else in the world in an academic setting. Is phenomenal here. And we used to be very tied into the GW community, because when I went to school here, I served as an adjunct professor here. My wife used to work here at the university. So we're a very GW-friendly household. But it's here in Washington, when I came here, it was wide-eyed. I was ready to get to it, and you learn so many things. And it's talking about accelerating that. Through this program, I've met so many different people and had so many different unique perspectives that has helped take me to that next level in my career. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Your your 13 years in one district makes me feel kind of like floozy or something. So I am no longer on the Hill. I am currently White House liaison at the Department of Homeland Security, which is a unique role of bringing in political appointees to the department, working with the White House and the Secretary to identify needs and bring people in to fill those needs. At this point of the administration, with a year left, it's a lot of managing the outflow and ensuring people stay as long as we need them, or rearranging deck chairs as people leave. But I've been there about a year, and before that I was on the Hill for about 10 years. Unlike the other panelists, I was in a lot of offices. I went through 4 offices and 2 internships, mostly in the Senate. My last job, I was chief of staff for my hometown congressman from Las Vegas, which is what brought me to, or I came to DC from Las Vegas for law school, as Dr. Billett said. And I didn't even know these jobs existed. I didn't know there was this opportunity. I thought I could go do international transactional law. And a friend back home said, you need to go intern with Harry Reid because you're there. So I reached out and harassed and harangued, a lot like you. And it came down to, we think we'll have a seat for you, but we're not sure. And I thought they meant a space. They literally meant a place to sit. Sure. And when I got there, I realized, yeah, I mean, like as big as these places are, they have limited space. So I worked out a split shift with them, and I would come half day. And after that first semester, I was just completely hooked, and I wanted to throw away the whole law career and go work on the Hill. I ended up running to a campaign after graduation back home for a congressional district that we lost. Came back, went to a senator from Indiana, and I was there for a few years. And I was working, basically from the bottom up, similar, with a law degree, which was a little controversial with some family. And I I moved around a lot, I think, to get to the roles I wanted to play and to work on the issues I wanted to work on. So worked on immigration a lot. I worked on tech and telecom, which I think there's kind of a thread running through here. And I was primarily a counsel for four different senators. But then again, my last job was the chief of staff for the hometown congressman, which seemed like something I'd always wanted to do, is work for the hometown guy, not for Indiana or Colorado or Hawaii or wherever I was. I kind of picked some good places, actually. So I came to GSPM midway through, and what I was looking for was to expand. I narrowly focus on what was in front of me. It was always reactive. You're chasing what's going on the floor. You're chasing what your boss is wanting to work on. And I wanted to sort of step back and think about, well, what is it we're doing here, and what are the other things I'm not working on? So one of the coolest classes I got to take was, and it's very bipartisan. So Rodney Whitlock, who is, I believe he's still
Republican. Yes, he's still teaching for us also.
So he's a Republican, I'm Democrat. And he teaches a couple classes, but one of them is healthcare policy. And I never worked on healthcare, ever. And I sat and watched Obamacare become law, and I didn't understand. And I went and spent 6 weeks with Rodney, and it was as if I was a healthcare policy expert. I took an energy class. I'd never worked on energy. And then there were things where I thought I knew until I was in a room with somebody like breaking it down and walking through, and I was able to learn a lot more about and think more about what we were doing. And I really treated it as like this academic experience, and it was, and it really helped me think about what I was doing. It also introduced me to a lot of people that were outside of my normal sort of stream of who I dealt with on the Hill, which was both bipartisan and kind of different levels, and it was a really solid experience for me. So.
I think the one thing that's different about my experience than these guys, I came in and I'd heard this, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, I came in as a press secretary which is actually fairly rare.
Yeah.
I'd never worked on the Hill, and then to come in for a senior member of a very heavy committee with no Hill experience was a bit odd. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
And so my experience, obviously Canada, but I'd been on some campaigns. And so that was really what made the difference in me getting that job and going forward, because I was working for a very political member of Congress who always had a tough race, very, obviously very swing state. And so the experience that I brought to the table from the press perspective, and this is I think this is very different as counsel and legislative expert, those are skills that are tremendous, like working on the Hill from a legislative perspective in the creation of policy and the movement of legislation. It is such a very nuanced and surprisingly, I'm trying to think of the word, unique experience. So much, like you said, it's not the Schoolhouse Rock, but which I loved that. But I think that we used to get Detroit cable.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that for my trajectory, it was a bit different because the skills, like, yes, I had to learn how this, I feel like I learned so much from folks like these guys, but the skill set that I came with from a press perspective, I garnered on the campaign trail. So there's a couple different ways, I think that what we've talked about is that it is a unique environment, and it's a tremendously amazing privilege to work in this environment. But there are a couple ways that you can go about it, and it's not just, and this is very typical, like working your way up from a lower level up through the offices is really a lot of how it happens, but there are other ways to make it happen.
If you could, just briefly focus on skills that you believe were especially helpful in your getting the job and on your success on the job.
For me, let me start with being successful. I tell my students when I teach, you need to know how to do three things, and three things well. You need to understand the policy, you need to understand the politics, and you need to understand how to communicate the intersection of both the policy and the politics. And it's not, and that is, it sounds easy, but it's not, because so many people don't understand the legislative process. And that's one thing that throughout my career and even at GSPM that I really honed in on is understanding the process. Understanding how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And it's not, both from a political standpoint, you need to understand what's driving the policy. And from you need to understand how the policy will then reverse itself and drive the political messaging, and how that all is communicated. And I think that, in addition to going to or taking the courses at GSPM, I also availed myself to the opportunity to take, it used to be much more robust than it is now, but the Congressional Research Service offers a legislative institute on the Hill. And when I was initially doing it, there was 3 phases. And you had an introduction, then you had an advanced, and then at the end, the third one, you would go to the graduate, and they would take you to Richmond, and you would you would role play and do all this, but they don't do the graduate anymore.
2007 was the last one.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because I can't tell you how many people that I run into that I went to Richmond with and developed those relationships, and they're like, oh, you served as the committee chairman of this and whatever else, and it's so availing yourself not just of the resources that the GSPM has, but connecting in when you're on the Hill, whether an intern or an actual employee, availing yourself of those opportunities there too.
So persistence, so this is how did you get the job. Persistence is huge, and every single job has been, I'll apply to this one or I'll apply to that one, but every single job was through someone that I had networked with or had known or had worked with me every time. And that I've seen that. It didn't happen for me exactly with GSPM, but I've seen that where a professor who is on the Hill will be able to say, hey, here's a fellowship or an internship or even an entry-level job and I know you, and I'll recommend you. And that has so much value. And I've talked to people on the Hill who are hiring, and they will only talk to people who have come recommended. I've actually seen somebody come to this analysis where they've said, I looked at my pool of candidates who applied, and then I looked at the pool, and I sort of pulled out who I thought was most qualified. And then I looked at who had been recommended, and they matched. And it was the people who are the most qualified have figured out that they need to get sort of recommended. But for both things coming together, you're not going to get in the door. And so persistence, and then getting out there and meeting people who can help you.
And I think, to echo that, it is really relationships, and I think on both the getting in the door and then being successful. It's, I ended up on the Hill very strangely, as I've already alluded to. Former GSPM graduate and she had said to me, come and work this quiet down ticket race with me in Missouri in 2004. I don't know if you've heard of a woman named Robin Carnahan. So Robin, we were running for Secretary of State. It was dubbed by one newspaper the 2010 Senate race. So needless to say, it was not a quiet down ticket race. Really fantastic. We went against the tide, and we were one of the only statewide Democrats to win that year. But personally, I wasn't able to move to Jefferson City with the campaign and once we'd been elected. So, through relationships, people had said, well, let's go to Washington. And someone said, well, I know somebody at this one particular consulting firm. And this is going to sound really strange. I've become obsessed with people's biographies. I will spend hours on websites reading people's biographies. And the reason why is I went on this consulting firm's website and I found a woman that went to the legislative affairs program. I went to the political management program. I went to the University of North Dakota. She went to North Dakota State University. And at the end of her bio, it said, I know how to drive a combine. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's a very large implement that swaths grain. So I sent her an email with the subject line that said, I know how to drive a grain truck. And she responded back, this is the best email I've ever received in my life. When you're in town, please sit down with me. And she was 9.5 months pregnant, and she hand wrote 2 pages of people for me to call. Tell them, this person that you know me, tell this person you know my husband. I'm like, I don't know your husband. And she said, well, by dinner, he'll know all about you. And I'm like, okay, great. And each and every one of those people took my call because I'd come recommended. And then they referred me on to somebody else. And when I was interviewing with my member, it was very strange because I just thought it was kind of another networking meeting. And I was living in Chicago at the time, and I went back to Chicago, and I get this call, and it says, hey, it's Earl. And I was like, Earl who? And he just goes, the congressman? I said, oh, hi, how are you? He goes, so do you want to come and work for me? And I'm like, oh, sure. And it was because it was so unexpected, but the relationships that we created during that time were just so important, and that translates even further as you go to work on the Hill. Because one of the things that Schoolhouse Rock, which we all love, doesn't tell you, that there are so many things that happen, good things that happen to make legislation better, to get things passed, that happen in the corridors. Staff that may be Democratic or Republican that have forged relationships in some other venue that you can have conversations. And I don't know if this is true, but there's a story that floats around Washington that the deal for Obamacare to get passed was done in the diaper aisle of Costco between a Democrat and a Republican. And you cannot get that is something that that it will always make you successful while you're on the Hill, while you've left the Hill. Those relationships continue to move on. And it's one of the things about the Hill that I don't know if you guys would agree with, it's a very interesting introduction card, like a calling card, because immediately you say, well, who did you work for? Oh, yeah, I worked for so-and-so that worked with so-and-so. Do you remember working with them? It's all about relationships. And I would never say it's who you know, but it's making, the connections that just are really beneficial. And to be honest, a whole lot of fun, because we all you don't do this if you're not somewhat nerdish. And, you kind of find your people. And you talk about things like who's your favorite presidential candidate, or what's it like to pass this piece of legislation. And it's not only beneficial, it's extremely fun.